Hello. Oh, and welcome to that. I think that's better. What I'm pretty sure is episode 65 of 10,000 Stitches podcast. A knitting podcast all about the joys of small scale knitting. My name is Andy, and thanks for joining me today. I'll talk a little bit in just a second about why I didn't record last week. Because I was ready to, and then life got in the way. But anyway, if you're looking for me on the interwebs, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Ravelry as Purlbug, Purlbug. You can find me on... you can find my blog at thepurlbug.com, and we have the 10,000 Stitches podcast group on Ravelry. I lost my focus because I was thinking I maybe need to move the microphone. I'm going to do that really quickly. There we go. Hopefully now the sound won't be all weird. Anyway, if you're looking for links to anything that I mentioned today, patterns, shops, anything like that, if you're watching this on the embedded video in the blog post or the Ravelry thread, everything will be linked right below the video. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the description box below the video, there will be a link to the blog post. You can go there and find anything relevant. I'm currently recording on Monday, May 29th, which is Memorial Day here in the States, which is why I'm recording on a Monday. I don't have work today, so yay. And this episode will go live on Tuesday, May 30th. So yeah, let's talk about why I didn't record last week. I don't know if this is only like an American sort of phrase or if it's a phrase that they use in England as well, but there's a phrase that we use here that goes, when it rains, it pours. And because I know some of my viewers, English is not your first language, and I don't know how well, sort of idioms like that translate. Basically, it means like when one bad thing happens, a whole lot of bad things happen. And obviously, like that's not always the case, but it kind of feels like that because that's what you really like remember and pay attention to. So we're having one of those instances right now where it is pouring on us. I think I mentioned the last time I recorded that Wesley's car has gotten hit again. It's now in the shop and repairs are pending, but of course, that takes time too. So we're currently without a car. And I'm trying to think, there was something else too. What was the other thing? There was something else other than just not having the car, but I cannot for the life of me think of what it was. So on top of all of that, basically, not having a car, which is really frustrating, so last Sunday I was, doing whatever, kind of starting to think about recording, and then all of a sudden my computer just is dead. Right? I was like watching a YouTube video or something, I don't remember, and then all of a sudden it just like froze up, and I was like, well, that's weird. And like it froze up and had the spinning beach ball of death, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I had to like force shut it down, which is never ideal. So then I go to turn it back on, and it is kind of taking forever to like turn back on, which is pretty usual for me because I kind of don't shut it off frequently enough. But anyway, and then it starts coming up with this blinking little folder icon that has a question mark on it. And basically what that means, at least on a Mac, is that it can't find your hard drive. Like there's some problem with your startup disk. And in my case, I went through all these steps and it can't find my hard drive. And like it's as if it's not there. So obviously then of course it can't start up because it can't find the programs that it needs. And I've had this problem before with my computer, and the last time it happened, it was just the little cable that connects like the hard drive to everything else was burned out or shot or whatever, and that was like a $60 fix. So it can either be a really cheap fix like that, or it could be that like my hard drive or my logic board or something is fried, in which case that's a very expensive fix that I'm not quite ready to undertake right now. So it could be one of those two things, but of course I can't get my computer to an Apple store to get it looked at because we don't have a car. So, it's just like, it's like one of those things to where this is just really frustrating. So I'm currently recording using Wesley's computer, and hopefully this will work okay. But yeah, it's just like one of those frustrating things. Oh, another annoying thing, like this is not like a bad thing, but like another annoying thing is, I have a pen pal, my Canadian pen pal, who I think I've mentioned before. Hi, Paul. I know you watch these sometimes. I got a letter from him, a couple weeks ago, and I went to go like write him a return letter, and then I couldn't find the letter. And Wesley had been tidying up, and I asked Wesley like, "Hey, where's that letter?" And we don't know where it went to. So Paul, if you're watching this, I lost your letter. I will be writing you back today, but I lost your letter. So yeah, it just makes me feel like the worst person. Oh, and I remembered the other thing. I promise this episode is not going to be just like all complaining. I'm probably not going to talk about any of this stuff in chit chat because I kind of just want to get it all out of the way at the beginning, and then we'll have a nice happy episode. Anyway, the other thing that was really frustrating was that this past week we were having some problems with the sound, the little pitter patter of feet inside of our walls, and the sound of chewing inside of our walls, which, means that we had rodents or squirrels or something inside the walls. And, totally not our fault. Like, they were coming in from outside. It wasn't as if they were like being attracted by something inside our apartment. So, it was completely not our fault, but also somewhat outside of our control, because it's not even as if we could do anything about it because they were not in the apartment. So we had to deal with that, which it turns out was an easy fix. I let my landlord know or landlady know, and she dealt with it really quickly, but it still meant like a couple of nights where we didn't get very good sleep. And so it was just like, why is this all happening at once? But anyway, I've rambled on long enough about how miserable my life is, and it's not really that bad. Like, when I stop and take stock, it's like, you know what? We have a roof over our head. We have food in the cupboards. Yes, we don't have a car right now, but luckily we don't need a car, like on a day-to-day basis, we're just fine without a car. And even if we do need a car, like we did need a car this past week, I can rent cars, and like my work has like a special like corporate code that I can use, which saves us a huge amount of money on rental cars. So like even that, it's not so bad. And there's Uber and stuff, and all of these problems are fixable. The little critters in the walls was a fixable problem, and I think it's been solved now. Even the computer plonking out thing is a thing that like I have the money to fix it. I just don't want to spend that money right now. So it's like, it's not so bad. It just is one of those things to where it all is happening at once, and I would like it to not happen. But anyway, let's talk about some knitting. Let's talk about why you guys are here. So we're going to do kind of the normal format today. We'll do finished objects, works in progress, what's coming up next. I'll show off a little bit of dyeing, because I still don't quite have like everything ready and set up to sell because I don't have a computer right now. So I'll show off a little bit of that, and then we'll do some chit chat. So yeah. Let's talk about what's finished. Let's talk about the big thing that's finished, which if you follow me on Instagram, you will have already seen. But I finished my first sweater. So this sweater, the pattern is Polly by Isabel Kramer, I think. And it's just a very basic cardigan. And so I've shown this off a couple of times. This is what it looks like. And I'm not going to put it on right now, but I will put in some pictures of me wearing it so you guys can kind of see what it looks like on. But yeah, it's just a basic fingering weight cardigan with stripes, and it has this sort of like garter section on the top. Raglan shaping. It's okay, let's do the specifics. So I knit this as per the pattern, which uses a 2.5 millimeter, no, US size 2.5, which is a 3 millimeter needle. I knit the size large because my gauge was a little bit tight. And the things that I changed the way that the stripes are done. The stripes are supposed to have 10 rows in between contrasting color stripes. I did 8 because I like to do things in sets of 10. So this way, one main color and one contrasting color stripe was 10 rows. I shortened the sleeves, as you can see, because it's such a lightweight cardigan, and I knew I'd be wearing it at work and stuff during the summer. I didn't want long sleeves, and I just in general don't like long sleeves. Like, I have long sleeved things, but I always roll the sleeves up. Like, I always roll the sleeves up to at least like here, which is like about 3/4 length. So these I made to go right above my elbow. So these are sort of like half sleeves because I don't like things touching the back of my wrist or like being right around my wrist. I think it's because like I'm so tall and my arms are so long that I've never had clothes that really fit properly. Like, sleeves are always one of those things that are too short. And so it's like they're always too short. And so then I got in the habit of rolling them up, and now I just don't like things like touching my wrists. So yeah, these are little half sleeves, and that's pretty much it. I haven't put buttons on it yet because I just don't have any buttons and I can't go to the store to get buttons. But I did do the little buttonholes. You can see a little buttonhole. So I have the buttonholes there ready for when I have buttons, but I just haven't done them yet. And, oh, my screen just went a little bit dark. I should wiggle that. Okay. I don't want the computer to go to sleep while I'm recording. So yeah, I have the buttonholes. I put in, I think, 6 buttonholes. The pattern calls for 5, but I think I made the body a little bit longer too. So I just kind of went with what seemed right. And then the only other modification that I made, so I didn't do the shawl collar. I just did a plain, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think like 16 row collar. Or button band, I guess, because I didn't want the shawl collar. And then the only other thing that I did was I did add a row of crochet, like chain slip stitching to the inside, which I don't know if you'll be able to see that. It's right here, this row. And I just did that along the top. So it's like along the first row of the body, not along the collar. And I started it at the edge of the sleeve, kind of right where you were casting on, like, so it goes across the top of the sleeve, across the back, and then across the top of the other sleeve. And that's just to provide a little bit of structure to the back of this because, it's not as stretchy as the garter stitch. Just to help to keep it from like getting, super slouchy and gross on the shoulders. I mean, it's a pretty loose fitting cardigan as it is and pretty sort of comfy. But I did want it to have just a little bit of structure there along the sort of like the back of the neck. So yeah, I am very happy with it. Unfortunately, it's been too warm the past couple of days to actually wear it. But, I know like my office is very cold. I think I've talked about this before. My office is kept at like 65 degrees. So I know that, come tomorrow when I go back to work, I'll be taking this with me. And I'm sure we'll get a lot of wear at my office this summer. Also, these yarns are both hand-dyed yarns that I did. And I had quite a bit left. So I have this much left of the contrasting color. Where's my main color? I have this much left of the main color from the third ball. So it used basically two full balls and then probably about half a skein of the main color. And then, I don't know, maybe half a skein of the contrasting color. I'm probably going to take these to work at some point because I have a scale there and weigh and see how much I have left over. But yeah, I would say that this sweater is maybe between 300 and 350 grams. So pretty light. Obviously it'd be heavier if I made the sleeves longer, but yeah, I am very pleased with it and I'm very happy that it's done. Yeah, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. But I think I'm going to really quick pause and save and all of that, and then I'll be back and I have more finished objects to show you. I actually have a bunch of finished objects to show, well, 2 more. But anyway, I'm going to save and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have more finished objects. So what do I want to show next? The next thing I will show is I have all my sort of stuff I wanted to do today in this bag. So the next thing I will show is something that has been a work in progress for a very long time, and I finally just, dug deep and got it finished this past week. And that is my traveling cable mitts, or fingerless gloves, whatever. So I've talked about these pretty extensively before, so I won't talk too much about them, but this is a pattern by Purl Soho. I've knit the traveling cables hat. They have a fingerless glove pattern that goes with it, but it's meant for sport weight yarn, so I adapted it for fingering weight yarn. I will link to my project page, which has a sort of like a modified chart for doing these using fingering weight yarn, and sort of the modifications that I had to make otherwise are on that page. So these were knit, like I said, using fingering weight yarn. It is the 80/20 superwash merino nylon sock base that I use quite a bit. This is one that I dyed over Christmas of 2016 at my mom's place. This was the first attempt I made doing black yarn, and as you can see, it did not take very evenly, but I think it still turned out really pretty, and I'm really liking the way that it worked on these. And I knit these with a US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter needle. So this is what they look like. This is the cable pattern on the back. So it's much more like distinctive in real life. And I took some pictures of these for my project page, so maybe I'll try and insert one of those pictures here, because I think it gets so washed out on camera that it doesn't, like, the cable pattern is not obvious, but it definitely is in real life because it creates such a raised texture that then you can definitely sort of see, with the shadows and everything, that cable pattern. So yeah, the cable pattern goes up the back, and then the palms are just ribbed. And here you can really kind of see how the yarn looks when it's knit up. I just think it's really pretty. And yeah, because of the ribbed palms on these and everything, they fit my hands, which are pretty large, but they also will fit smaller hands too. So I'm not thinking I'm going to keep these for myself. I'm probably going to just hang on to these to use as a gift when I need something like that. But yeah, these are done. I really only had the second one to finish up, and kind of once I really set my mind to it and just got it done, it went really fast. So yeah, very excited that those are done now. And I have a big chunk of the yarn left, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with the rest of this, but maybe knit some short socks or something with like a contrasting heel and toe. That might be kind of fun, because I really like the way that this knit up and the way it looks so modeled. But yeah, so that's finished object number 2. And then finished object number 3 is one that I kind of talked about these a little bit. These are a gift that I'm knitting for someone, but I'm not going to say who, and I'm not entirely sure that they watch the podcast anyway, and it's going to be a gift for far later in the year, so even if they do watch, they won't know, or they'll forget by then. But anyway, so these are a pair of socks that I knit with, do I still have the label somewhere? I might not have the label, but anyway, the yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners. It's like their signature 4-ply or something, and I believe that this colorway is called Mallard. I think it's these sorts of colors. So these are what I have left, and then the socks are they look like this. So as you can see, it's very sort of neutral, muted kind of colors. Yeah, Wesley describes them as like older man colors, which I think is a very good descriptor. Like, it's stripy and it's kind of fun and interesting, but at the same time, like, it's not jarring. So what I did with these, as you can see, the foot is knit plain. It's just, this is how the yarn looks knit up. But then for the top part, so the leg part, until I got to the heel, I actually used the Broken Jack pattern. And this is not the first time I've done the Broken Jack pattern. If you've been with me for quite a while, you'll know that I knit a pair of Broken Jack socks out of the Knit Picks Felici and the Time Traveler colorway, and those are some of my favorite socks that I've ever knit. I wear them all the time. And it really, basically this pattern uses like short rows to create this sort of diamond effect. And it just really, really looks good with like self-striping yarns, because it just takes what might otherwise be just a very boring sort of repetitive sock and turns it into something very interesting. So this is kind of what the back looks like. And because of the way it's done, you never wind up with like 2 identical socks. So like these ones, I mean, granted, these ones I didn't start in identical places. So you can see that they look similar, but not the same. So yeah, so I did that on the leg, and then I did a Fish Lips Kiss heel. So you can see Fish Lips Kiss heel. And then just a plain foot, because I figured the foot is going to be, sort of like in shoes or something anyway. And I really did want to show off just sort of the, very basic striping that the yarn itself has. So I thought this was a good sort of marriage between those two. So yeah, so if you're doing, patterns that are kind of interesting like that, are meant to sort of play with that kind of stuff, don't be afraid to only do half of your sock like that, and then do the rest plain if you want to show off the yarn by itself. But yeah, the Broken Jack pattern, it's not a free pattern. I think it's like $5 or something. It's definitely one that I really enjoy, and I should do it more, because especially now that I kind of have been like, oh yeah, I can do that just on the leg. It is such a fun pattern. And like I said, it uses short rows, but you can kind of use any short row, like whichever short row technique you like best. So I did mine using the twin knit stitches and twin purl stitches that you use in the Fish Lips Kiss heel, just because those are the ones that I'm most comfortable with. And then it, I don't have to pick up wraps and turns, because I've done wrap and turn short rows before and I don't like them, because I can never remember how to pick up the wraps properly. So yeah, I really like it. It does, I don't know if this is unique to the twin knit and twin purl stitches, but it does kind of create like a little bit of like an indent here, which is sort of similar to what you get along, sort of the diagonal of a Fish Lips Kiss heel. But I don't mind it, and I think it really, just sort of plays to the way that the pattern looks. So yeah, those are finished object number 3. And then the other thing I have to show you guys is not really a finished object, but it's sort of, it's a project that has reached an end point. And this is the other sort of lingering work in progress. If you couldn't tell, I was looking to clear out some works in progress. So, that's why I finished the traveling cable mitts, and then this is the other sort of, I just spit a little bit. Sorry about that. This is the other sort of lingering work in progress that I had, and that is my flax light sweater. If you guys remember, I was knitting this in like a baby size, and it was just sort of for me to get the feel of what it's like to knit a sweater. And then I sort of got, I was working on the sleeve. So like I had the body and everything done, and I was working on the sleeve, and I just realized that I just really hated working on it. And some of it was just the needles that I had, and I could have gone and bought different needles and all of that. But I also didn't have a recipient for it. I was just sort of knitting it, and I was going to be like, well, I'll just put it away as a gift for someone I know who's going to have a baby eventually. But I just really hated it, and I really liked the yarn that I was knitting it out of, so I decided I was just going to frog it. And so this is the remains of my flax light. This is the main color that the sweater was being knit out of. And then I have the little balls of contrasting color. I don't know, this is one of them. I think this was like the neckband in contrasting color. So yeah, this yarn will now be repurposed. As you can see, it's this really bright sort of, oh, come on, focus. It's this really bright sort of variegated, neon yellow-green color. So I'm excited to use it for something that will actually get some use rather than just sit in a, someday to be gifted bin. So yeah, that's a project that has reached the end of its life, even though it's not actually finished. But yeah, that's that. And then I only have one work in progress to show you because the other work in progress is currently at work. It's the sort of variation on the simple skip socks that I'm knitting for Wesley. I think I showed these off the last time I recorded. Once I finished these socks, I took that into work to be the thing that I work on at work. So I don't have it here with me, but I haven't made tons of progress. I'm still just on the first sock and just, working my way down. So hopefully I'll have those to show you guys next time I record, but we'll see. And then the other thing, so this is what I started after I finished the sweater. And this is a pair of socks for myself. And these are the Speckled Space socks. And so this is what I have so far. So it's a short sock, as you can see. So I have, a little bit of leg, a heel turn, and I just finished the gusset. I'm like a couple rows past the gusset. But yeah, so the pattern I'm using on these is the Speckled Space socks, and this is what it's looking like. So yeah, this is the second time I'm making this pattern. If you remember, I made a pair of these for my little brother's lady friend with that, sort of robin's egg blue yarn that I dyed up. So this is being knit with some orange yarn. This is a 7525 Superwash BFL nylon blend. Oh, computer, don't go to sleep on me. There we go. Yeah, so 7525 Superwash BFL nylon blend. This is one that I dyed up quite a while ago, and it's this just sort of really variegated orange with some speckles of like red and yellow and pink in it, and I just really love it. This is what it sort of looks like sort of the underside of the foot, which is like the more plain part of the yarn. So yeah, I'm really, really loving it. I think this is like the perfect pattern for this yarn. I mean, I think the Speckled Space sock pattern is one of the perfect patterns anyway. So yeah, obviously I'm knitting this top down. I knit the first pair that I did top down as well, and I will link to my pattern page where I sort of talked about the modifications that I used to knit it top down. Basically, because the pattern is written to be toe up, and I wanted the chevrons to still be going in the same direction, that is pointing towards your toe. And so basically you just read the chart instead of, bottom to top, you read it top to bottom. You basically read it the opposite way that you normally would. And then I have just inserted a couple of plain knit rows to make it work a little bit better. But otherwise you don't really need to modify it. So yeah, like I said, these are a short sock because I wanted another pair of shorter socks that I can wear in the summer. And it's being knit 68 stitches, 36 stitches for this top of foot part, 32 stitches for the back, on US size 1s, which are 2.25 millimeter needles. I might have forgotten I forgot to mention the Broken Jack socks were knit 72 stitches on US size 1s again. So that's that. But yeah, I'm really pleased with these. It's such a popcorny pattern that like I sit down and it's so easy to bust out like 5 or 10 rows on this. So I have no doubt that these will probably be finished maybe by next weekend. Maybe at least one of them will be done by next weekend. Maybe the pair will be done. So yeah, so that's that. And then I'm going to pause and save, and I'll come back, and then we'll talk about what's coming up next. And I'll show off some dyeing, which I've been teasing sitting here, but I will actually properly show it off in just a second. Okay, so what's coming up next? In terms of, well, so the next thing sort of on my plate is going to be another sweater, mostly because I would really, because I kind of enjoyed knitting the poly, but I kind of want a sweater that is a little bit less of a time commitment. So if you guys remember, I picked up this yarn when Wesley's parents were in town, so at the beginning of the month, because I got it on sale. And this is Anchor Bay, which is a 50% cotton, 50% superwash merino blend by Cascade Yarns. And this is a DK weight yarn. And so I've been scouring for patterns that I'm going to knit with it. And it's, you know, I actually knit up a swatch with it the other day, and like after I knit up the swatch, I was like, yes, I need to have a cardigan in this yarn. And so I think the pattern that I'm gonna do is probably the Greystone cardigan by Sarah Cook, I think is the designer. Although I haven't entirely decided yet, but either way, it's going to be sort of like an oversized, like sweatshirty sort of cardigan. Because yeah, this is just such a cozy yarn. And basically the only thing that is keeping me from casting it on now is, one, I want to finish my Speckled Space socks, and two, I actually don't have the needles that I need. I think what the needles that I think will give me the best gauge and actually give me the gauge for the Greystone are US size 7, which I believe is a 4.5 millimeter needle. And I do actually have some because like I said, I swatched it, but the ones that I have are only a 24-inch needle, I think. And I need a longer needle to do a cardigan. So, and because I don't have a car to go to the store, I can't go buy one. So I just haven't gotten new needles yet. And at this point, I'm kind of trying to wait until next payday to be, you know, a responsible person with my money. So yeah, that's on the horizon, and I will probably cast that on as soon as I finish my Speckled Space socks. After that, I might take a little break from knitting sweaters, although I do have my eye on a sweater that I want to knit myself as like a birthday present, but that's, you know, way towards the fall. But yeah, I think that this will be a really good, you know, sort of thing to have in my wardrobe and be something that I really wear a lot. And then after that, I might sort of, especially because like probably after I finish this one, it will be really like the middle of summer here, and I'm not going to be wanting to knit sweaters. So this is probably my last chance to get a sweater knit before we start into the horrendous Virginia summer. So yeah, that's what's next on my plate. And other than that, I don't really have much planned. I'm kind of trying to just like take it as I go. I'm sorry I'm so shiny. It's kind of like warm in here. Anyway, I'm trying to just kind of take it as I go, and we'll see what strikes my fancy when I finish everything else. So let's take a look at some dyeing that I've been doing. Like I said, and I talked about this a little bit last time, I have some yarn that I've dyed up. I think I have about 9 or 10 sock quantities worth of yarn that I've dyed up, and I'm planning to get listed on Etsy when I can. You know, with the whole, with just all the things that have been happening lately, I just haven't got a chance. But here's another sort of preview of what will be in that batch. So I have one that is a huge win for me, and I haven't tried this again, but this yarn is the closest I've ever come to dyeing something brown, which is really tough to kind of get if you are using, you know, more like natural, like food safe dyes like I use, which is Kool-Aid and food coloring. So this is what it looks like. And it's sort of a light tan because I just didn't have enough Kool-Aid, but this was basically a equal mixture of grape and orange, and it kind of has given me brown. So I would like to do this again with more of each to get a more saturated color and see if that works just as well. But that was a very exciting sort of first for me. And even this one, I really like it. Like I really just enjoy the way that it came out, and I really think it's very pretty. So that's one of them. And then the other two I want to show are sort of fun colors. And this was a couple weeks ago now, But Starbucks had their unicorn frappuccino that was like all over the Instagrams and everything, and I never got one. I don't even know if they were available here. I know they were only available in like select places and all of that. I never got one because it's just like way too much sugar for me to drink in a drink, and I just knew that I could get it, but I wouldn't actually like it. But I was inspired by that, and I dyed a unicorn skein of yarn. And so this is what it looks like. So it's kind of like pinky reds and some purple and blues, and it's just very speckled. And it just based off of that unicorn frappuccino concept. So maybe I will try and put in a picture of the unicorn frappuccino sort of on like one side of the screen and this on the other, so you can kind of see if they're at all similar. But yeah, so that's that one. So this is called Unicorn. And then the other one was sort of inspired by the unicorn, and this one is Mermaid. And so I used sort of the same technique to dye this one as the unicorn one. But this one, I basically swapped out the pinks for green. So this is a much more sort of like aquatic themed one. So it's got blues and purples and greens. It's got sort of like a yellowy green, and then also like, oh, which side am I on? Like more saturated greens. But yeah, this one is my mermaid skein, and I'm just tickled pink about both of these. Here, I kind of put them together. I mean, as a set, like they're not exactly like they kind of clash a little bit, but like I loved them, and I will probably try and dye up more sets like this because it's just so much fun and so whimsical. So yeah, that's some of the dyeing. I haven't actually done a lot of dyeing lately because I just haven't had the time or the energy for it. But yeah, hopefully again soon. But yeah, so that's that. Let's talk about the knit along. So we are just about halfway through our pink or intricate knit along. We have, as of right now, I think 12 finished objects. So that's awesome. I know we're kind of halfway through, so we should be seeing some more rolling in. I know a lot of the ones that have been there have been sort of the, pink or red, like have been on the color theme. But, the intricate theme is a good theme to try out. Like the speckled space socks that I've been showing off, like these guys. These guys would totally fit for one of the intricate patterns. And I linked a couple of other ones as well in the chatter thread, so if you kind of want to see some ideas for those, you can go there. But yeah, otherwise pink or red as a color theme is totally cool too. So that's been exciting. Hopefully I will have some prize yarn dyed up for that to show you guys by the next time I record. But yeah, keep them coming in halfway through. Still plenty of time to get in, knit a pair of socks or a hat or something like that. So yeah. And then question of the week. So, my question of the week was sort of a request for you guys to show me how you do a thing. So let me see if I can. Okay, I think this one I can show it. So when I was knitting my cardigan, the Polly, I sort of realized that the way that I'd been weaving in ends was perhaps not the most effective way, / it left the right side a little bit bumpy. And so I was trying with a different way to weave in ends, and I sort of came upon this method, which I also used on these socks. So let's see if I can get this, if I can get the camera to focus on this. So you can kind of see how I've woven in my end there, sort of going in like that sort of zigzag pattern through sort of 2 rows of the purl bumps on the back with 1 row in between them. So that's sort of the method that I've been using, on the Polly and now on these socks. And I'm liking it because I think it just produces less of a disruption on the front side on the right side of the work. And I think it's a little bit easier than what I was doing before. So my request for you guys is show me how you weave in your ends, or, describe it or whatever. But how do you weave in your ends? Because I feel like that's one of those things to where there are as many ways to weave in ends as there are knitters. Like every knitter has their own little way of doing it. And it's like one of those things to where I'm just super curious about it, because it's one of those things that could always be done better, right? Like could I be doing this in a more efficient way? Like I have been weaving in ends the same way pretty much since I picked knitting back up as sort of an adult, and it this has really changed things for me. So how do you weave in your ends? I'd love to see it. But yeah, that's going to be it for the knitting stuff. So if that's all you were here for, thanks very much for hanging out, and I will see you hopefully next week. Otherwise, let's do some chit chat. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not going to be talking too much about sort of like what's been going on in my life, because I basically covered it all in my little, pity party for myself at the beginning. And otherwise, like, life has been really boring, just, doing the work thing. So I'm actually going to be talking a little bit about a couple of books that I've been reading and all of that. So if you want to see that, hang around and we'll do that. Okay, so let's talk about some books. So if you've been around for a little while, you'll know that one of my goals for 2017 was to read 25 new books. And I'm really chugging along pretty well on that goal, although it definitely seems to come and go in spurts, where sometimes I'll get a lot of reading done in a month and sometimes I will get hardly any done. I've definitely been getting more done lately because my computer is broken, so that means less time that I can spend just wandering around the internets. But yeah, so, speaking of, I'm not going to do a full goals update, but as of the end of this month, I will have reached my savings goal for the year, so that's kind of exciting. But anyway, we're talking about books. So I thought I would talk about a couple books that I've read lately, and sort of talk about how I choose the books that I read, and sort of at what point I decide to abandon a book. So the book that I'm currently reading is called... By the way, sometimes I do reading with real books, as you can see here, that I get from the real library. Sometimes I do reading on my Kindle. I don't buy books typically. I either get them from the library, like this book is from the public library, and there's a book over here that's from the school library. Or if I am getting Kindle books, I get them through Overdrive, and I get them through the public library, because at the rate that I go through books, I would be spending a lot of money on books. So anyway, this book is called, what is it called? I wasn't prepared. I had the passage up that I wanted to. It is called Simple Matters, and I will put the title down here somewhere with the author. It's called Simple Matters, and it's about minimalism, sort of. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I kind of tend to follow a minimalist sort of attitude towards the things that are in our apartment and sort of my life in general. Another book that was really good on the subject is called Essentialism, I think. And again, I'll put the actual title and author down here somewhere. But the Essentialism, the whole book basically can be distilled down to the phrase less but better. And it's not just about the stuff that you have. It also talks a lot about how you spend your time, and sort of the decisions that you make when you decide if you're going to say yes to something, and when you should say no to things, when you should say no at work or in your personal life, stuff like that. So that's a really good book that I definitely recommend. And I reread it probably about once a year just to sort of refresh the ideas in my head. But anyway, this book is much more of the sort of material sort of minimalism. I think it's sort of on the same ilk as The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, which I have not read because maybe this just sounds really hipster, but it's just everyone's read it, and I've kind of heard enough about how it works that I'm just I'd rather not. But I think this is sort of more on that sort of vein, except it's less... I don't know. I like it. I'm really enjoying it. And there was a paragraph in the introduction, which I started reading last night, that actually just so profoundly spoke to me that it made me tear up a little bit, which is pretty unusual for me. And it really, spurred me to read the rest of the book. And there's parts of the book that I really that don't apply to me, talking about having kids and stuff like that. And it's well, that doesn't apply to me. But it's really just nice to read. There's nothing really super... life-changing or profound about it in terms of the suggestions being made, because I already know a lot of these things, but just sort of reading it is just nice. And I think it's a good introduction to minimalism. If you want to get into it, but you're not into sort of weird fad things, keeping only things that bring you joy. Anyway, so this is the passage from it that really got me. And she's in the introduction, she's talking about I think it's her husband, although at the time it might have just been her boyfriend, sort of moving into their first apartment together and sort of just like starting her adult life. Like I think she said she was 23, the author, and he was like 25 or something, and just sort of like starting being an adult and like all the stress that comes with that. So she says, lives are complicated. In the same years that we were learning to make our home, we endured other deeply human experiences. We experienced death and crime and sudden grief. We continued falling in love. We missed our families. We wrung our hands about our careers. We plotted our futures. In some moments, we felt unspeakable joy. And we found that life isn't always simple, but the curtains can be. And then she goes, on to, then the book really gets into some of the more like concrete suggestions and things, but even still, like, they're not super concrete. But it just, like, I don't know, like, it just really spoke to me. And it's just, she talks a lot about like that everything she brings into her home needs to work, needs to earn its keep, basically. And it needs to do that either by being beautiful or being functional or hopefully being both. And basically, if something doesn't do those things, then it shouldn't be kept. And, like I said, Wesley and I try to be very minimalist because we live in a very small apartment. Basically, what you are seeing right now, this is our dining room table, and our kitchen is right there, and it's a galley kitchen, and it's very small, and right behind the camera is our sofa, and then the wall is maybe 6 feet that way, and that's the edge of our apartment, and then this hallway, that's our bedroom, and our bedroom is basically the same size as this entire living space. And our bedroom, obviously has our bed and our desk and storage, so it's like we live in a very, very small apartment. And so we also have to be very like intentional about the things that we bring in. And we've been trying to do that a lot, bringing in things that we like, spending a little bit more money on something that will work better and will also look nice, because our apartment has no storage, right? So everything is out in the open. Like our bookshelves are out in the open, like they're not hidden or anything. So we made sure to buy the ones that we really liked and that will work well with the rest of our decorating style. So, but even still, like, even though we try really hard to do that, like, we still wind up with too much stuff. So, like, that's part of what I've been doing today, and I'll keep doing this afternoon, is sort of, like, just sorting through all of this stuff and figuring out what can go. But anyway, I really like this book. I'm not done with it. I think I'm maybe about halfway through it, but just based on what I've read so far, I would definitely recommend it if you are curious about, like, minimalism and looking for some sort of low pressure ways to get into it. Because she definitely doesn't advocate doing this like giant clean sweep. Like she advocates more like being intentional about what you bring in and being ruthless about what you send out, but you don't necessarily have to do it all at once. Like it can be a process. So that's a book that I'm currently reading. Let's see, what had I read before this? The books that I was reading before this, let's see, what do I have in my library here? I read the book called Stumbling on Happiness, and I don't remember if I've talked about this before. Stumbling on Happiness is sort of, it's not a book that I'd necessarily recommend because it's sort of talking about like, why are we so bad at predicting what we will like and predicting what the future will be like and remembering the past and, all of that. And basically what the book boils down to is that we're really bad at remembering what happened to us, right? Because of the way that we sort of encode memories and the way that our brain works, we don't actually remember things as we happen. We sort of remember snippets of them. And then when we go to recall that memory, we sort of fill in the blanks with what seems most right. And so our memories are super duper fallible. And because of that, we tend to make predictions that are super wrong because we predict things based on how we feel like now or like what we think of it now, but like that's not right because like future you is a different you than current you. And like one of the examples that he uses is like talking about having some sort of like a horrible accident or something and like being paralyzed or something, and that like a lot of us will predict that like, oh, we would just be miserable, but it turns out a lot of people who wind up paralyzed are not miserable because that's your life now, like you're predicting that you'd be miserable based on how you are now. But once that happens to you, you have a different sort of set of standards for how you view your life. And so like that was really interesting and good. And it was kind of interesting to read all of that. But then he makes this suggestion at the end, like basically like, how can we do this better? And it turns out that like, scientifically they've shown that the best sort of predictor on how happy people are is asking them, how happy are you right now? And even that, you know, there's some limitations to that, but like that seems to be the best predictor. So his suggestion is like, okay, anytime you're trying to make a decision or anytime you're trying to predict something, like let's say you're trying to predict how would you feel if you moved, let's say, to Richmond, Virginia, right? Like let's go back almost 2 years now to Wesley and I trying to make, or, you know, making the decision to move from, you know, Wisconsin to Virginia. Basically, he says that, like, you don't know, right? You can't predict these things. And so the best thing to do would be to ask someone who's currently living that decision. Oh, computer, what are you doing? Quit it. And so the best thing for us would have been to find someone who is, you know, had made the move and is currently living here, basically us now, and ask them how they feel about it, which in a way kind of makes sense. Like, I mean, that's obviously what we did before we had like Amazon review systems, right? If you were trying to like figure out like, oh, should I buy a thing? You'd see if one of your friends had that thing, you'd ask them if they like it, and if they like it and you trust them, you would go buy the thing. But I think, you know, and so that's great and all. And I think sometimes that's like a way better way to do things. But I think in a lot of ways, it's just super inconvenient. Like for big things, that's just super inconvenient. Because it's like, well, how am I supposed to find someone, you know, if I'm living in Wisconsin and I'm thinking about moving to Richmond, how am I supposed to find someone who lives in Richmond that I can ask about how they feel about it? So I don't know. I thought the book was okay, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Like I'd recommend it if you can get it from the library, but I wouldn't buy it. So there's that. So that's that. And then, so let's talk about when I decide to abandon a book. So this year, you know, obviously I've been trying to read more books, and I've also been a little bit more ruthless about abandoning a book if I don't like it. And sometimes it's just a matter of I don't like the writing style. Like, because I read mostly nonfiction, I'm super particular about the writing style. And so if an author just doesn't really like connect with me, I will stop reading a book. Or if it turns out that the subject matter is not what I thought it was, I will also stop reading a book, which is the case with this one. So this one is actually a book that, you know, I've mentioned before that I watch the Yarn to Table podcast with Celeste. And in one of her vlogs, she was sort of panning through her bookshelves, or her and her husband's bookshelves. And I saw this book on her bookshelf, and I, you know, just like the title of it caught my eye, or, you know, the title and the spine caught my eye. And so then I went and looked at it on Amazon, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then inevitably wound up getting it from my local library. And the book is called Rabid, and this little subtitle is A Cultural History of the World's Most Diabolical Virus. And so it's basically about rabies. And so I'm on what page am I on? 54. And this is due back to the library tomorrow, and I will be returning it tomorrow and not finishing it. Nothing against you or your husband, Celeste. I forget which bookshelf it was on, but it turned out to not be what I was looking for. So, right, so the key word there is cultural, right? And I read a lot of nonfiction that is sort of like science related. And so this, I think I was hoping would be more like medicine related and more scientific. And at least so far, it is not. It is definitely about sort of the cultural, you know, implications that have been always wrapped around rabies and sort of things like that. Like it definitely is a cultural history, and it's talking about the people rather than the disease itself. And maybe, you know, that makes sense because like rabies is one of those things to where once you become symptomatic, you're dead. Like there's very little that can be done for you. And so, you know, there is medical research into it, but it turns out like there's not a lot you can do. So yeah, so that's when I decide to abandon a book. And I try to do that pretty early on. Like I don't try to be too ruthless. Like I try to make it a decent chunk of the way into the book, like a couple chapters before I decide that it's not working for me. But that's also why I get most of my books from the library, is because then it's very low pressure, right? If I decide I don't like it, it's not a big deal. I haven't spent money on it. And it, you know, it allows me to sample more books than what I would maybe normally read because it's so low pressure. So that's a book that I'm giving up on. I've given up on a lot of books this year, just because, you know, why waste your time reading something that you don't enjoy when you could be reading something that you do enjoy? So that's that. And then this is the last thing I'll talk about. This is a book that I just got from the school library yesterday. And it's called Much Ado About Practically Nothing. And this is sort of a science history book, as near as I can tell. And it is, a history of the noble gases. And so these are the kind of books that I totally love. I love science history, pretty much any kind of science. I love science history. And this is, like sort of chemistry, but I've also read, I just got done reading a book about genetics, the history of genetics, called The Violinist's Thumb by Sam Keen, which was very good, highly recommend. I've read another book by him called The Disappearing Spoon, which is about the history of sort of the periodic table and the development of the periodic table, also very good. But yeah, so this is one that I'm super excited to read. This is one that I'm not going to be in like a super big hurry to read because, like I said, I checked this out from the school library, and because I'm a faculty member, I can keep things for like 6 months. So I have a long time to read this. But, sort of the way that I pick books out like that is I just look for a book that either the title grabs me, which is sort of the case with this one, or, I know that the subject matter is going to be interesting, sort of like science history or stuff like that. But yeah, that's sort of how I pick out books. And like, that's why I love libraries. That's why I love Overdrive, is because it allows you to just sample a lot of things without, feeling too much pressure. Like, what if I don't like it? It's like, well, what if you don't like it? You just return it. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be about it for this week. Yeah, hopefully I'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll be recording on my computer again next week. Who knows? But yeah, that's going to be it for me. Thanks very much for hanging out with me this week. And yeah, I will see you guys when I see you again. Bye.